Robbie Vann-Adibé. I am the CEO of Inpulsus. We're a strategic marketing consultancy, and we help organizations design, build, and execute influence programs. So one way we have of describing that is we help put influence at the center of organizations' marketing activities. And so, many of today's sessions have been about running programs and the effectiveness and efficacy of those kind of things. We are feet on the street helping companies do that. We don't consider ourselves to be an agency. We don't execute campaigns for organizations. We help companies learn how to do this stuff themselves. We have relationships with many of the technology providers out there in the market, and we help organizations build programs that are very analytics and technology based, if you will, going forward. Today, I am speaking with a friend and customer of Inpulsus, Andries Smit from Upside. Andries, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who what Upside is?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Robbie, and thanks for having me. So Upside is a marketing platform to help marketeers reach customers on the basis of their spend data. So we use open banking. And at the same time, it also puts money into the pockets of those end consumers. One of our core missions is we believe that marketing today can do with some improvement. All of our data is being used everywhere, but it's being exploited for a handful of companies around the world, whereas actually there's a lot of benefit into the data for each individual end user. But happy to tell you a little bit more as we go.
And how did you come to start Upside? I mean, your journey on this, because I always like to have people explain why they're qualified to actually be talking about a topic. And I know your background. I know you're eminently qualified to be talking about this. So why don't you give people a little dose of how you came to be here?
Yeah, I would sketch it in two layers. So I fundamentally see myself as an entrepreneur, had various different startups across my life, and therefore had always had to do with marketing. I had an affiliate-based business previously. I was everything from D2C into B2B and a mix in the middle. But the other side of this is I've always been in financial services. And in one shape or form, I always fell in love with saving and how people think about money and how do they, most importantly, think about money in the long term, and why do people not save anymore? So confronted with those two sides of my experience, I always had this unfinished business as to how can I achieve both? How can I help both the end user save more, but at the same time also solve some of the paradoxes that we have in marketing? How can we be much more effective? And then what happened is back in 2018, in one of my previous roles, we started looking at open banking and this whole movement around open data, to be fair, across pieces. And we stumbled upon a fact that actually there's so much value in that. If we can unlock that, then it would, on the one hand, can help businesses understand their customers better, not just understand, but actionably reach them in the right way, on the right time, with the right offers. And at the same time, put the real value into the hands of those consumers, right? And tangible cash into a savings account, and therefore achieving both my life ambitions in one go.
It's great. It's a great product, great service. I think the world's going to hear a lot more about this theme. So, given your extensive background in marketing related activities, why did you decide to make influence a key part of your strategy going forward? Because it's a relatively new practice to you as an individual, but also it's new to the organization, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have tested and tried many, many different things, everything from performance marketing and branding and you name it before. But you're absolutely right. Specifically focusing and zooming on influence, I've never done before. which was also why working with Inpulsus and yourselves was critical to us in guiding us through that journey. But the reason why we were intrigued by it is Upside is a B2B to C business, or you can think of it as a marketplace. And that means we've got this really interesting mix of both end users, people on the street, John and Jane on the street, as well as corporate clients in a typical B2B sales environment where we need to reach in. It's quite a complicated go-to-market endeavor or marketing challenge we needed to solve. And one of the important things on that is that we needed to create a level of trust around the product. It's also new. Open banking, yes, it's been going a few years, but in the use case which we're doing it, it was completely new to market. So that form of endorsement by experts in these areas was critical, as well as the reach. Because in these early days of such a breaking a new market, there's a lot of education to be done in the market. People tend to look to influencers and people in the know to go to them and go, thumbs up, you really should be looking at this. This is the trend. This is where we're all going. So it made a perfect strategic sense for us to test and try this out.
Yeah. I think the point that you make there, that when you're, for want of a better term, perhaps creating a category, like there really isn't much out there like what you do. There's always bits that are part of, you can always point to something and say, we're kind of like that and a little bit like that and a little bit like that. But when you're doing something that is relatively new in the market, I'm a big believer that influence has to be a key part of the strategy because, and in some of the other sessions, these folks have been around since from the beginning, back in the 90s when I worked at Oracle doing a variety of different roles, right? We had folks who were evangelists, we had advocates, we had all kinds of stuff, and we had programs for doing those things. And the means by which they achieved influence was different than it is today, but they had very similar roles and very similar impacts. I think the fundamental difference today is so much of what they do is now measurable, right? And that's become the big difference, is that you can see, yes, this person is famous, but how much they actually influence what's going on out there, right? And the tools and technologies allow you to zero in and see who is having influence and how are they having influence. Because, one of the other dirty little secrets is there are individuals out there who have, they're like the antimatter of influence. If they say your stuff is good, it hurts you in the market. Those are things that some of the technologies that you need to help you through that mix, right? So for you guys, what did putting influence at the center of your B2B strategy mean for you guys? How did that translate in sort of tactical, tangible ways?
Yeah, I think the first thing is we needed to really take a little bit of stock as to what was going on and what were we doing and what were we not doing. So it didn't just happen overnight. We didn't just woke up and go, okay, we need to shift course here. But when we mapped out our next 12 months and we understood which markets do we need to get into, which networks do we need to break into, the next obvious question was how. And we then, after testing different things, we could have gone just for basic LinkedIn ads. We could have tried running social campaigns on our own. We could have tried the old school, just going to endless number of conferences ourselves and meeting events and so forth. And all of those are still some part of our overall strategy. But actually, what we realized is if we really want to scale this thing fast, we saw influencer marketing as sort of the turbo boost, if there is such a thing, for those endeavors. And that's why we then ended up putting it in the center of the strategy. It is worth saying that did cause us to take almost a 2-month break. We literally had to stop, and you could argue a 2-month delay before we then got going again. And that was a super hard thing to do. And that was really the main decision point for us as a leadership team. We needed to ask ourselves, are we prepared in that? And especially when you're a youngish business like us and you're growing, that's like an infinity. Stopping the business or the marketing strategy for 2 months is almost an impossible thing to do. Now, today, having gone through it, I'm happy we did, but it was very nervous times at that stage as to, are we really doing the right thing? Is the risk worth it, etc.?
I think that's, perhaps one of the benefits of working with an organization like ours, right? If you had been doing this with a traditional agency and you said, you know what, we want to pause the campaign while we get our stuff together, that would have caused pain on both sides. I think this notion that we're teaching you how to fish as opposed to doing the fishing for you, allowed us to be collaborative in that way and say, you know what, we got to get all this stuff straight, and then all the other stuff that follows will be effective. Tell us about the journey so far. I mean, we know this is the never-ending story, right? This will be going on for a long, long time, and is meant to, right? It isn't. I think that again, sometimes when people use the word campaign, I always get a little bit twitchy, because if you're doing it right, it is, it's a process that begins and never ends. You're always engaging with folks. Tell us a little bit about that, how it's gone for you and where.
Yeah, so we're 4 months into the process, and I absolutely agree with you. We never saw this as a campaign. I think influencer marketing is not something you turn on and off like a PPC campaign. It just doesn't work that way. You burn your bridges with those individuals. You're actually looking for long-term fans and a real deep appreciation of each other's businesses, and it's a constant back and forth. It's almost like an inner circle, right? That's the other thing we've learned. I didn't know that beforehand, but we now have that. In terms of the journey, the first month was really about, like I said earlier, taking a step back. Yourself and the Inpulsus team were really good at just bringing us back to basics. What is the brand? What do we stand for? What do we want? But not in an artificial way. I've been through these endless brand and strategy things where it just never get to a damn point. It didn't feel like that. It was to the point, it was clear, and we moved through it. But it was important to ask those questions. What then happened to us is we, both organizations, went out and we had a bit of a look. So if this is what we want to stand for, if these are the networks we want to break into, then who are the people? What are their types? What are their archetypes? Where do they live? Where do they operate? Where do they communicate? And for me, that was actually something I've experienced for the first time. And for the first time, that concrete examples, when we started looking at individual influencers, was literally the first time where this whole thing became real for me. Influencer marketing is very conceptual, and we can talk about it all very day. But when you're saying, I need Johnny and Jane to talk about your business, it very specifically gets to the real stuff. How do I do that? Why would they do that? What are they interested about? Who listens to what they say? And that was a good. The second month was really around understanding all of that logistics. Now, of course, we ended up with quite a big list. From memory, I think we had about 100 or so. And clearly, you've got to then do prioritization and so forth. But in itself was quite a good exercise. It helped us distill down to 3 things that we want to be known for. And again, that then helped us naturally filter down to, okay, here's the short list. We ended up being about 40 influencers that really hit those sweet spots. It really helps us talk about those specific topics, and most importantly, really reach the audiences, the end clients for us that we wanted to reach.
And the medium that you've chosen to engage with these folks around is what dialogue that you've been creating and the output of that. What's that being translated into?
Yeah, again, the Inpulsus team was really good in giving us options. There were many different things we could do. The usual suspects like webinars and roundtables and thought leadership and so forth and so various different angles. what we felt, because of the data wealth and the insight wealth that we as a company have, we felt that the right channel and medium for us would and is a white paper. So we then engaged with that 40 influencers that we shortlisted, literally reached out to them, started the conversation. Of course, that wasn't just a first date, will we get married kind of conversation, but we started building that up again, very well supported and helping us learn how to do that little dance. And in the end, we managed to get 12 of those 40 influencers to contribute and help work with us on the white paper. Gave opinions, gave article insets. Some of them even contributed and wrote pieces like specific chapters of the white paper. And what, I mean, I heard it at the beginning when it was said to me in the process, but actually afterwards, having got those influencers to co-own some of the content means that they've been super responsive. When I reach out to the guys to say, can you just quickly check the first draft, can you comment on it, I kid you not, it's within the hour or within the day at most. You can literally feel a very different thing. Now, that's something I wouldn't have expected at the beginning. I always had a bit of a hesitation because I always thought these things drag on weeks and months before they get back to you. But having them, like I said, co-own or being invested in that influencer strategy has been surreal. It's been the big difference for us, I think.
Yeah. What do you think it was that caused them to engage? I mean, you know, think of the person that you've been amazed at how interactive they've been and how forthcoming. You know, what was their motivation for being that active with you? I mean, did payment, right? A lot of the last session talked about paying influencers. You know, how many, you know, did you pay these folks? Is that why they're so excited to work with you? What did that look like?
So we did not pay any of the 12.
None of them.
No. Out of the 40 that we asked, there were 3 that literally on point blank said to us, they get thousands of these requests. You know, they do this as paid for engagements. And then that's it, take it or leave it. Those were very specific archetypes, by the way. They were the consultant basis. So in our space, we really wanted to speak to retailers. Those 3 influencers were categoric commentators on the industry. That's what they do, right? They go to boards and they give comments over the industry. So you can sort of understand that. But that's not a model we were prepared to go for. Like I said, we really wanted people to raise real opinions about it. Now, you know, we didn't get everybody. So, you know, if you discount those 3, there was a good 20 or more that just said, no, thank you. This is not something we want to do. And you've got to respect that. These are, out of those 40, you've got to understand that the whole process led us to 40 very influential people. And therefore, they are very busy. They, you know, everybody wants a piece of their time. So you got to respect that more than half said no. But I would think we're a startup and therefore we just were scrappy. We just persisted, kept asking. We were trying to be very relevant to the individual. So when we approached the influencer, we knew them backwards, inside out. This is not 2 minutes on a LinkedIn profile, quickly checking out and using 2-3 words that are going to resonate with them. They were defined, researched. We knew exactly what do they talk about, who follows them, what is the latest thing they're interested in, and so forth. So before I send that little LinkedIn message that say, dear Tanya, can you please, are you interested in, we knew exactly what might, and the messages to all 40 were completely tailored. So many times in other marketing initiatives, I would see people write up one message and then just blast it to 40 and, you know, think that's going to work for everyone.
And let's pick influencers and maybe not just a sense of place they have in the ecosystem. What is it they do, and you know, who's their audience and why are people listening to them, and have they made any introductions to prospects? Because, you know, that's one of the things at this stage that I've always found, which is, you know, if you're we should probably add that as a caveat to all this. I don't know that anyone said it explicitly. If your product's crap, don't do influence marketing, right? That's one of those. I don't know. No one ever says it, but it needs to be said. You know, if your product or service isn't, do influence marketing, because the influence, if when you engage in the way that you just described, your influencers will not only tell you that your product's crap, they will tell the market, and you don't want that, right? So make that sort of test, assuming your product is good and the service is good, then, and you go down there. Why did these guys get, you know, engage? And what I was saying was that I've often found that these folks, they get excited about it, and then they're like, you know what, this stuff's good. I'm going to introduce you to. Was there any dynamic?
Oh, 100%. And let me just be very clear. We did not rock up with the idea of doing a white paper. By the time we did this, our chief data scientist, Sam, who is former BCG and an extreme expert in what we're doing, spent months preparing the data and be ready. So when we spoke to these influencers and invited them in, we knew our stuff. The data was ready. We could flick it open. I literally shared my screen and quickly showed them a little bit where they could get a sense for this is not just someone else that has an idea that faffs around. We were ready. It was structured. It was clear. We had everything in there.
You were showing them data that they had probably never seen before in that way and in that fashion, and it was coming from your product, your service, and that's what rocked their world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, to your earlier point, we were very fortunate. I mean, we have. I won't give it all away, so I won't name names now. But check out the white paper that's launching next week, and you can see the names behind this. But we had C-suite CMOs of high street pharmaceutical companies. We had Neds on grocery chain, you know, on the boards of grocers. We have customer experience experts who normally go to those boards and coach them about how to reach in. They are part of that cohort of 12 that contributors. Phenomenal people with extensive networks and you know, really well respected within the industry. Now, if you want to speak to somebody like that, you have to have your act together. And not only, it wasn't just even flashing data. We needed Sam packaged it with the team into 10 insights. So we knew that in that first 2 minutes, we needed to show them or say something which they go, we didn't need them to agree to it, but we needed to hit them. They needed to pause and just sit back and say, do they now agree with this or not? Otherwise, they just didn't bite or wouldn't bite and get into the detail.
Yeah. You know, this, you know, what you're describing is the way that we believe that it should be done, right? And if you wanted to have an example of, you know, where the dialogue needs to occur, is you, right? Were you in nearly all of them?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And in the preparation.
And in the preparation, so you know, this is not something that there's tons of work that the team participate to help you look smart in the moment. But the moment is a lot of times you in the mix, right? So, you know, what I was using on the B2C side is, you know, Elon Musk is at Tesla. He knows their product. He's the guy that has the dialogue with all the influencers on what they're doing, right? And by the way, Tesla is a company that does influencer marketing, probably, you know, one of the best, if not the best, example of how to do this stuff in the world, right? You know, it requires the top, I think, is the message that I would take away from that. You know, this is not something that can be easily delegated in the early days to the team. It's something that you, as the person leading the show, understanding so much of how all this stuff needs to work, needs to be part of. And that was part of the hook, right? That's why they wanted to talk, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, Robbie. And I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned, again, I was skewed with traditional marketing mechanisms and machines where in my head was sales funnel, right? Get as many in as the top and just pump the funnel top, keep throwing in. And actually, this was the complete opposite. This is my experience was it was about building deep relationships with these 12 key influencers, and it was a massive mindset to not wanting to do 1,000 influencers and I need 1,000 people on LinkedIn to talk about me. No, just the 12, but it needs to be the right damn 12, and therefore you have to invest the time. I mean, I rush 1,000,000 miles a day, as do many other people, and having had to sit down and prioritize this was probably one of the hardest things to do, because again, these are smart people. I mean, they grilled me. Don't be under no illusion. It's a pretty uncomfortable place, right? You're sitting down with a Ned of a grocer, and you're telling them that you understand customer annual value better than them, and that you've cohorted the non-loyal and the loyal and the VIP and the VVIPs. It's it's an interesting place. Bring an extra pair of pants, I would say, but it's you've got it right. And if you understand that and you understand the value you can get from it, then you have to invest the time and the preparation.
Everything you just said times 10. I think sometimes people look at influence marketing. This is cheap and quick and effective. No, right? It's a lot of work. You could almost argue we're back to the old days of marketing. It's hand to hand. You're in the weeds and the trenches making all this stuff happen. What comes out of that are relationships, content. The stuff will then feed the rest of your marketing activities. It's not that you're never going to do, PPC type stuff in the future. It's that when you do it, you've got all kinds of backup and material and understanding needed stuff that's come out of doing the work in this way that is then behind very targeted spends in different mediums and activities. When you eventually do a webinar, and it'll probably be on the list, it'll be a very focused, informed by influence kind of activity, right?
Absolutely.
If there's an organization that has not done influence or has not influence marketing, what would you say to them? Or should they do it? Should they not do it? Why? If they shouldn't? That you have around that, having been on this journey now?
Robbie, only two thoughts. The one is, if you're not doing it, you should. We live in a world of influence. Our kids live like this. The market lives like this. Humans are moving in cohort trends like never before. So influence marketing, I've come to really appreciate, is unavoidable. You have to do it. Number two is get a partner, get a trusted partner that can help you through it. It's not as simple as you think. It's very different, from my opinion, very different than any of the marketing strategies and techniques that I've used before. So I had to unlearn a lot of issues and biases and habits I picked up along the line. And I think we would have made a royal mess of it if we didn't have a partner. So find the right one and give it a go.
Great, thank you. Obviously, a big believer and proponent of this one, particularly upside where it's new. You're almost category creator, if you will. There's enough money to be raised in the world to cut through the noise that's out there, right? No matter how much you raise, you will never be able to buy enough keywords to get this thing in front of the people it needs to get in front of. You can't. And this is a mechanism for allowing you to cut through that stuff and invest the time and energy to do it right. What comes out of it, I think, sets the stage for so much can and should follow. So, I think that you guys are, a great example of how to do this stuff. And I look forward to, down the way, documenting perhaps later stages of the journey with you in another session somewhere down the way. So thanks for your time, Andreas. I know you're a very busy man. Bill, thanks for taking the time to talk with us all here. And I'm going to wrap it up here. I know we're early, but I'm a big believer in keeping things condensed. So.